I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm here with my fabulous co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Yes, and together, Rebecca and I are giving you an hour of radio called For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a program where we talk about the ecology and the environment. We talk about it in terms of how it affects you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the happiness of you, your friends, and your family, and your pets. And we like to do it with a little bit of humor, and we like to do it as accurately as possible. We are very conscious about the fact that there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation about the environment out there these days. And one of the reasons we're here is to fix that. And so if you have any questions about the environment or ecology, don't hesitate to give us a call. This is a call-in show, and it's the best show in Ohio, but it does get better every time you call. The number is 866-240-1065. That's 866-240-1065. Rebecca and I will drop everything and take your call because we really want to talk to you about these environmental issues. Got a good show lined up for you today. It is, once again, Rebecca and I are broadcasting from our homes, as so many people are. And, when we come into the studio normally, sometimes I like to come in a little early and go to the game room, and just play a little bit of, video games and maybe shoot some pool if some of the other DJs are there. And it's just a way to kind of relax and get yourself, prepped for doing something amazing, which we can't do while we're at home. So this week, I'm back in the tuxedo. Yep, I just felt like it was that kind of a week. I need to kind of amp up the pressure here, and I'm doing my show with a tuxedo, and so I'm all dressed up and ready to go. And we've got a great show lined up for you. Our guest calling in at about 8:15 will be Pat Marida, who has been our guest before. She is with the Sierra Club out of Columbus, and she is, in fact, chair of the anti-nuclear group in the Sierra Club. And she's going to be talking about an amazing, horrible bill which has already passed the Ohio House. Those of you who listen to the show regularly know all about House Bill 6. Well, this is the sequel. This is the radioactive son of the monster, House Bill 6, House Bill 104. It's if you can imagine, it's something even more egregious, even more just blatantly corrupt, pro-nuclear. It's incredible. So that's coming up at 8:15. Before we get started, I wanted to talk a little bit about something very pleasant, and that is, as you know, this year we've got our garden going, and we were out watching the garden grow, in the evening there on Friday night, and it was a beautiful, beautiful night, and the fireflies were out, and it was really terrific. That's one of the best things about living in this region of the country is we do get to see fireflies. And just a few interesting things I learned about fireflies. One is that a lot of fireflies in the adult form actually don't eat at all. They just they're only there to look pretty and get mated, and so that's an interesting thing. The ones that do eat, some of them eat pollen, others eat other fireflies. They use their flash to mimic a different species. So the fireflies from that come on over and they get caught and eaten. So they're kind of tricky. Another interesting thing about them is that they take about 2 years for the larvae to mature into full-fledged fireflies. So the fireflies you see this year, you're not going to see their offspring for 2 or 3 years. And the offspring, the larvae, are really kind of funky looking. They look like trilobites. You know, they're all segmented and they're small, of course, but all firefly larvae also glow. They don't flash brightly like the adults do, but they have this low-key glow that's always going, usually in the end of their tail there, and it's to warn predators that, hey, I'm a firefly larvae, because firefly larvae are poisonous to a lot of animals, and so don't feed them. If you got some kind of critter that eats bugs, don't feed them fireflies, don't feed them the firefly larvae. But even though they're tough and they're predatory, they eat things bigger than themselves, like snails and worms and slugs and things. They are very, very sensitive to herbicides and pesticides. So if you want fireflies, don't spray your lawn. That's a simple lesson there. Rebecca, do you see many fireflies up there? I know you're in the city of Toledo, but there's still some places around there that you might see them.
Not a lot where I've been hanging out lately. I think a couple weeks ago I saw my first fireflies. If you walk around downtown, you can see a lot near the lake, like in the bushes around the tall buildings, where there's shade. You can see them.
Right. Yeah. They like
the river.
Damp. Yeah. They like the river and the canals there. They like things damp. And if you want fireflies to grow in your lawn, one thing is to don't get rid of all the leaf litter, because they like to lay their eggs in that leaf litter. And I actually save a pile of leaves from each fall because I use it in the compost heap. And I didn't even know that is one reason we've got so many fireflies in our yard, is because they probably laid their eggs in that leaf litter left over from last year. So, yeah, they like water. And in fact, some species, the larvae have gills. They actually are aquatic. Just a really cool thing. And, do you have any memories of fireflies? If you do, give us a call at 866-240-1065. And would you be willing to make the trade? That is, would you be willing to forego spraying your lawn with pesticides and herbicides in order to have fireflies? I know my personal answer to that. But how about you? Or are you somebody that you just value that uniform, monotone green so much that you're willing to sacrifice the fireflies and pretty much any other kind of insect necessary to keep that plain green single color in your yard? Is that what you're after?
Also, your children and dogs can actually play on the lawn if you don't use the herbicide.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and they'll survive too. So let's see. Other news coming up. I have some updates on my solar power system, which is going in, but unfortunately I've got that in the context of something, another terrible thing the Trump administration's doing. We'll be talking about that after the break. We're pretty much ready, I think, for our guest. Pat Marida, are you there?
Yes. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Pat. Thanks so much for joining us here on For a Green Future. Yeah.
Are
you
so
still
happy.
there?
I'm very pleased. Yeah, I'm really pleased to be here. Really, thank you a lot for inviting me.
Now, Pat, we were arm in arm in the huge House Bill 6 battle last year, but the Ohio state government's at it again, aren't they, with this House Bill 104? I like to call it the radioactive son of the monster House Bill 6. I learned about this through an email that you had sent, and then I went and read it, and I kind of could not believe my eyes. This law, this bill, which has passed the House but not passed the Senate, it reads like satire. It reads like something that would be put out by The Onion. It doesn't even look like a real law. It's so incredibly badly written and so wrongly informed. But could you give us a little bit of information about it, a little bit of description of House Bill 104, what it does?
Sure. So, well, Joe, I'm involved because I'm a volunteer with the Sierra Club, and I chair the Ohio Sierra Club's Nuclear Free Committee. So I was aware when this was first introduced about a year and a half ago. And like you say, it is just bizarre. It is weirdly written. And unbelievably, it passed the Ohio House like 80-10. And it's been introduced in the Senate. So we don't know if there will be, it seems unlikely that it will be voted on until the fall, but you never know, and people should really try to keep track of it in the legislature. It's called...
Hold on. I just want to clarify a point. It passed 80-11, and all 11 who voted against it were Democrats, but unfortunately 22 of the ones who voted for it were also Democrats, so twice as many Democrats voted for it as against it. We can't just blame the Republicans on this one, unfortunately. This is a horrible bill, and it's, both parties are conspiring to once again steal money from the Ohioans. But you were about to give us the title of this amazingly poorly crafted bill. Go ahead.
Well, it has the acronym of ANSEM. It's the Advanced Nuclear Technology Helping Energize Mankind, which is kind of goofy, but what it does, it establishes two new entities, the Ohio Nuclear Development Authority and the Ohio Nuclear Development Consortium, and it authorizes tax credits if people invest in it. And both of these are completely unaccountable to the public. So it's like, well, what will these two new entities do? Well, they want to get public money and tax breaks, and they want to develop a small modular nuclear reactor. Now, at the national level, nuclear power seems to be kind of dying, so the federal government is very worried about this, and they're pumping lots of money. In fact, from now on, because Wall Street won't invest in nuclear, everything that's going to be done as far as nuclear power or of course, weapons is going to be paid for 100% by the public. So it looks like what these two entities will do is they want to develop these supposedly new kind of reactors, which really aren't much different from the old ones. And they also may want to reprocess high-level radioactive waste. And
which sounds innocuous enough, but what that actually means is they want to turn Ohio into a nuclear waste dump. Yeah, I refuse to use the acronym they gave their law, their ENACT, Advanced Nuclear Technology Helping Energize Mankind Act. Instead call it the Irradiate Ohio Act. But fuel reprocessing is essentially taking the spent fuel rods, which are, we've talked about it before, so intensely radioactive that if you start walking towards them, you'll be dead before you get there from the radiation. And like dissolving them and trying to pull out some of the radioactive isotopes and leave others and create fuel. But it actually, reprocessing creates more waste than you start out with, because you have to take these fuel rods and these fuel pellets and dissolve them in acid, and so now you have radioactive acid and many times more. Yeah, many times more, much more volume than you started out with those little pellets. But it's incredible. And this authority quote-unquote authority that they're creating, one of the things that struck me when I read this law, they call them stakeholders. They say that the people who are in the nuclear industry, in the nuclear industry and the safety and the generation and the industry part, they're the stakeholders. Nobody else is. There's no citizens on this in this authority. There's no environmentalists represented in this authority. There isn't even any government people represented in this authority. It's literally just people from the nuclear industry getting put into the state government for the purpose of creating nuclear waste and creating these quote-unquote advanced reactors. It's amazing.
So, who's behind this bill? Incredibly, this bill appears to be written by and for a Cleveland-based organization called E-Generation. And they have a parent organization called Energy from Thorium. And if you look on the website, these organizations are made up of a very few individuals. So this is a tiny group of folks that came up with this idea. It's pie in the sky, practically unworkable proposals. And yet their goal, of course, is getting public money. And whether or not anything ever comes to fruition, they want their hands in our pocket.
Right.
But they can't. They can't take ownership of radioactive waste. That belongs to the federal government. So they actually have. If you go online, they actually have. They want the Ohio legislature to petition the Department of Energy to make new rules so that they can, so that this authority and this consortium can take ownership of radioactive material.
Mm-hmm. Right. Like I said, they want to turn Ohio into a radioactive waste dump. Another bizarre thing about this law is that you mentioned there's a small group of people. This authority that they're trying to create would have 9 members. And if you read the law, it lists requirements for those members that are so specific that essentially they put into the law the resumes of 9 people they've already got in mind. At least that's the impression I got, because, it was, so many years doing this in this industry. And I'm like, they've already got their 9 people picked out, and it sounds like maybe these are the 9 people in that organization you're talking about. I don't know, that's a little bit of a leap, but not much of one.
Yeah, it's like unprecedented, and it's hard to believe that our legislators would vote for something like this. It's just kind of remarkable. You would lose regulatory control. I mean, these people aren't experts in handling nuclear waste, and right now the waste is being controlled by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and they're doing a very poor job. The waste is actually owned by the waste is owned by the Department of Energy, and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is responsible for licensing new facilities.
These people want those facilities to be here in Ohio. And I don't think the people of Ohio, if you ask them, would you like a radioactive waste dump right next to you, or a radioactive reprocessing plant, which these reprocessing plants, whenever they've been tried, have turned into waste dumps, because you can't, you've got all this extra radiation laying around. Nobody knows what to do with it, so it ends up sitting there. And in places like West Valley, New York, it's causing amazing problems, and they've spent billions and billions trying to clean it up. But now they want to do that same thing to Ohio. I think what's happened is they got away with House Bill 6. They got away with something that everybody in Ohio opposed all across the spectrum. All the newspapers, editorials were opposed to it. Anybody who looked at House Bill 6 opposed to it. And they're like, hey, we got away with that. Let's steal another couple $100 million. I don't know. It's really incredible. And it has contradictions in it. I mean, one of the lines that it says, one of the purposes of the law is to reduce waste and produce isotopes. Radioactive waste is isotopes. So you're supposed to be reducing. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, they seem to want to just they do everything. Give us some money and we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll do everything. And I didn't mean to misspeak about who owns the waste. There's kind of somewhat of a controversy. The utilities own the waste still, but the Department of Energy has agreed to take it, and so there's a lot of legal entwinement there. That the Department of Energy is being sued because they haven't taken it, because there's no solution as to what to do with the first cupful. So I'm sure that this new consortium at eGeneration will know exactly how to handle high-level radioactive waste.
The whole industry got started with that tremendous unanswered question of what to do with the wastes. And the answer was just, well, we'll figure it out. And here we are 60, 70 years later, somewhere in there, still no clue as to what to do with it. And so, yeah, the utilities own it until it leaves their property. It's just insane that Ohio, through this law, the state legislature saying, we want to be first in line. We want all that waste to end up here, so that this authority of 9 people, and it would be very interesting to take a look and see how many of these state legislatures those 9 people have actually made donations to. This thing is pure corruption, and unfortunately, our local House members here, Haraz Gambari and Paula Hicks Hudson, both did vote for it. And, again, selling us out, selling the people, the citizens of Ohio out to the nuclear industry. It's just incredible.
It says in the bill, the consortium shall have legal standing to represent the state if the United States Department of Energy fails in its obligation to provide a viable repository for the state's high-level nuclear waste. So So that actually gives authority to the state that it does not currently have under federal law. But imagine our state taking ownership of high-level radioactive waste.
That's a multi-billion-dollar task, and it would break the state budget, frankly, if we were to try to be the ones to take care of the waste that we've generated. And it could easily take up the entire state budget if you were to do it properly in a way that doesn't actually just release radiation into the environment. So
they'd be responsible. They'd be responsible for an accident, or we don't call them accidents. We call them disasters.
So what do you folks think out there listening? 866-240-1065. Do you want to be represented by this quote-unquote authority over which you literally have no say? There's no mechanism for any sort of public influence or input for this authority. It's just these 9 people. They get to make all the decisions about whether and how Ohio is going to get imbued with nuclear waste. Does that make you? Is that comfortable? Are you okay with that? Because you're thinking, oh, anybody who works in the nuclear industry we must be able to trust them. I don't know. Give us a call at 866-240-1065. So, Pat, where is this legislation? What's its status? You were saying it might not get voted on until fall, but tell us a little bit about what you found out.
As far as I know, it has not been assigned to a committee in the Senate. But please, if you're listeners, you can, if you don't know who your state senator is, just do a search for the Ohio legislature, or go to legislature.ohio.gov and look up who your senator is and give them a call and tell them how absurd this House Bill 104 is, and please don't vote for this. It actually says that, talk about money, the eGeneration Foundation will act as the consortium's agent, entitled to spend $1 million annually, as well as pay its manager $110,000 and an unspecified number of employees $70,000 each. So where is this going to come from? Well, it's going to come from our pockets, I'm presuming.
Yeah, I mean, that is literally pure corruption put into law. That is, we are going to just take money from the taxpayers and give it to this lobbying group and allow them to spend it however they want. That, folks, is corruption, especially if you follow it back and it turns out the people in this organization are making donations to the politicians who are giving them our money. I mean, if you need to know what corruption is, that's as clear-cut an example as you could possibly get. It just, like I say, the whole law is just incredible. Well, I know our local Senator Teresa Gavarone has drunk the radioactive Kool-Aid, unfortunately, and is ready to give the nuclear industry anything it asks for, no matter how outrageous. I think I'm going to try to get... I actually did call her office for trying to get an interview a couple times in the last month. No response. I'll try again. We'll see what she has to say. We're in a sorry state, folks, that if the federal government or if the state government is doing, even considering a law like this one, let alone passing it through the House with bipartisan support. Yeah, go ahead.
They also want to have eminent domain. So they want to be able to take over some property somewhere, I guess, to do this. And so they've asked for that. And one place where they possibly could locate this enterprise would be at what they call the Portsmouth nuclear site at Piketon, Ohio. It's a place where they enriched uranium for many years, and the Department of Energy is very anxious to have new nuclear facilities locate there. So that's one possibility. Of course, we haven't heard about it, but that's going to happen, and they're already there's a group down there called the Southern Ohio Diversification Initiative that has a $5 million grant to actually do similar research on an advanced nuclear reactor down there.
But so that's a possibility. But if we give this lobbying organization eminent domain authority, they could literally take anybody's house. They could say, right, hey, we want to put a nuke plant, right smack dab in the center of Toledo, nothing much going on there anyway, and just take all the property around it for whatever kind of buffer they feel they need, and there'd be no recourse because this law actually gives them the authority to do that. And again, this is giving the authority to an unelected bunch of people who work in the nuclear industry and there's no mechanism at all for any kind of public input or influence on what they're doing. And I couldn't believe this one section, Pat, that I read. Maybe you saw this. Maybe you can tell me if I'm interpreting this correctly. But it looks like it specifically says that these people can continue to work in the nuclear industry and get paychecks in the nuclear industry at the same time that they're serving in this authority. It used to be people complained about the revolving door between government and industry. And if this law passes, it's not a revolving door anymore. It's a patio. They could just, with French doors, you just go in and out whenever you want because you're both at once. Yeah, go ahead.
And they're not required to do anything. I mean, so they could just keep on with their regular jobs, collect $70,000 without actually even doing anything for it. So it doesn't matter to them whether they actually develop these things or not. They can. It's free money.
And maybe it's because I didn't read closely enough, but no term limits. I didn't see any limits. So it's just like $70,000 a year for life, kind of winning the lottery is what this bill is.
I believe it said they have the ability to extend it.
Right.
Extend their $70,000 a year deal.
All right. Well, Pat, thanks so much for coming on, for alerting us to this atrocity. We appreciate it. Is there anything else you want to cover before we move on in the show?
Well, not particularly, but I just want to thank you very much for calling this to your listeners' attention, and remind people, contact your state senator, because we don't want to have to pay for this.
Right. And you don't want to lose your home to some authority that decides they want to put a nuke plant in your town or a nuclear waste dump in your town. All right. Well, Pat Marida, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, as always.
Thank you again.
All right. So what did you think about what Pat had to say? The phone lines are still open, 866-240-1065. But one thing we're also open to is advertising, because this is a show that requires advertisers to stay on the air, and we're very grateful to our advertisers. And in fact, this week's show is being brought to you by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural resources, maintain quality green spaces, they provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats, and they lead outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. There's multiple ways to get a hold of them. One is to call them up at 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. Another is you can go to their website, which is just wcparks.org. And they also have an app that you can check out. And you just go to the App Store and search for WC Parks. And finally, they have a nifty Facebook page, and you can check out their Facebook page and follow them there. And that's the Wood County Park District. We're also brought to you by our faithful patrons. These are folks who've gone to patreon.com, and they just searched for a Green Future. And they discovered that we have listed several different levels of patronage that you can sign up for. And so every month a small amount comes out of their checkbooks. They don't even have to worry about it or even notice it. But we notice it, don't we, Rebecca?
We certainly do.
Yes, because that helps keep us on the air each week. And we're very appreciative of our patrons. So if you're interested, you would just go to patreon.com and search for a Green Future. Well, Rebecca, what did you think of House Bill 104 and what our guest had to say there?
That sounded appalling, frankly. I'd have to seriously consider moving, and I promised myself a long time ago I was never going to move again unless I was moving towards something. But yeah, way to go, Ohio. That may cause me to rescind that policy.
Well, if they start bringing in nuclear waste dumps through this authority, it might be prudent to not stick around in Ohio, especially if they're going to use their eminent domain to take parts of this someplace near you. But this is a story that has not been covered anywhere else yet, and I just want to point out now we're on to our news segment. And I just want to point out that our guests and our eco news, we're often way out ahead of everybody else, of the rest of the media. And I want to revisit a story that we reported on 5 weeks ago. And because the reason I wanted to bring it back up is A, it's important, but B, it's just now hitting the headlines in the mainstream media. And that, of course, is the story about the CO2 hitting the record levels that it hit way back in May. This is the 75th episode of For a Green Future. Yay! But back in episode 70, we reported that CO2 levels had hit 417 parts per million, which is the highest level ever recorded in human history. And the rest of the media is just starting to notice this. And it's incredibly important that we pay attention to this, because this is the number which is going to determine whether or not the human race is going to survive over the next 50 years. We've got to bring that number down. Now, to update the story, as we reported in subsequent weeks, after hitting that peak, the number did start coming down again, because what happens every year at this time is the trees in the northern hemisphere and the plants start growing. They start sucking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, and you get a temporary reduction that it comes down from that peak, and it continues to come down from that peak until the fall when the trees lose their leaves again. This year, that drop was enhanced by the COVID crisis because there was a big drop in CO2 emissions, and so it dropped down to a little bit to just under 416 parts per million from the high 417. Unfortunately, over the last couple days, it's been creeping back up again. This is really bad news. If this creep up continues, if even in the season of the year when normally the growing of the plants brings the number down usually, if we're putting so much carbon in the air, if the rebound off the COVID crisis is so strong that we start going up again, we are really, really in major trouble. We are. This is a story that we have to pay attention to. It's got to stop. We have to do it. This is not open for debate or open for interpretation or open for. You can't make a deal with carbon dioxide. If we keep pumping it in, it'll destroy our society. So
the trees basically did a reverse Lorax and saved us there, but they can't keep it up forever, is what you're saying.
Yeah, every year they do. Every year, once they start blooming, they pull the carbon out, and the carbon levels go down seasonally. Unfortunately, as we keep pumping it in, we overwhelm what the trees and the plants can take out, and it starts going back up again. And it's this. So it's been this jagged line that the trend is up. There's no question that the trend has been up, but if we start going back up in the time of the year when we normally are going down, that means we've crossed some sort of threshold, and we've triggered something that we actually don't even fully understand.
So that would seem to bode poorly for when the leaves all fall off of the trees again in the fall.
Yeah, right. So let's hope we come to our senses before then. All right, we are racing right along here, but I wanted to, since we're not all doom and gloom and crisis here on For a Green Future, wanted to note something of kind of interesting. The beavers are back in England.
Cool.
Yes, beavers have been extinct in England for the past 400 years, and somehow a colony of Eurasian beavers have reestablished themselves in England, and they are thriving and growing, and they've gone from a single pair up to a couple dozen beavers that are living there now. And it's funny because even in that situation, even in a situation where beavers had been completely eliminated from the ecology, now that they've come back, the local farmers are starting to complain. Oh, they're eating my trees, they're flooding my fields. We've got lots of trees, lots of farm fields, 0 beavers in England. This is a wonderful, magical thing because nobody knows where they came from or how they got back into England or what they've been doing or where they've been hiding for the last 400 years, but they have just reappeared, and the attitude should be, gratitude. And most people are grateful in that region. Most of the people who live in that area are actually just thrilled, and there's actually beaver excursions where people go and they watch the beaver swimming around. And I've done that. It's really fascinating to just watch a beaver go and, chew off a branch and swim it over to the dam and stick it into the dam at just the right place. It's really fascinating. I could watch them all day if I had the opportunity. But there's some good news.
I heard that
now
somebody discovered a new type of crayfish in Ohio this week.
Oh, yes.
It's blue,
yes,
but I think that's
blue,
normal for
right.
crawfish, perhaps.
No, it's kind of unusual. Yeah, it's the blue crayfish. Yeah, it's cool. I saw that. That's some more good news. A little more biodiversity here.
What is with this year and exotic blue wildlife?
Yeah, because we just had the blue bees a few weeks ago, didn't we, down there in Florida?
Yes, we did, yes.
Yeah. Blueness, interesting. Well, Now, I do have another piece of bad news that I have to cover, just because it's so important and it's going to potentially have such an incredible impact. There's another little lobbying group that has petitioned the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC. They've commissioned FERC to eliminate net metering nationwide. And net metering simply means that if you have a source of power in your household, like solar panels or a wind turbine, and you're putting more power on the grid than you're using, the utility has to pay you for that power. That's it. That's all net metering means. And so this group wants to eliminate net metering, which means they want to have utilities not have to pay for the electricity that individuals, that people put onto the grid. They want that electricity to be free to the utilities. Now, I'm in the process of putting solar panels on my house. Unfortunately, I need the net metering to make it affordable. Right now, with net metering, I'm going to get paid 6 cents a kilowatt hour for every kilowatt above what I use that I generate, which is pretty much the market rate. So if they succeed in this, which is it's record breaking, it's breaking new ground in several ways. One is that the FERC has never made this kind of regulation nationwide before. States have the authority over the electrical generation in their states. So for the federal government to dictate that states can't do net metering, that's a new thing. Now, using this individual authority, some states, particularly Hawaii, I'm going to use them as the prime example, have tried getting rid of net metering. And what happened in Hawaii is they got rid of net metering in 2015. And up to that point, solar installations were going up exponentially because there's so much sun down there, so much good weather. If you put solar panels on your house, you could actually generate a decent revenue using this net metering. They eliminated net metering in 2015, and since then they have had a 40 to 50% drop in solar installations. Instead of continuing this curve where everybody was doing it, now, because it doesn't pay anymore, it's just a luxury thing. It's just something that people who feel they need to do it to help the environment and who can afford to do it, which is not that many people. So one of the sunniest states in the world, the best suited for solar power, their solar installations are dropping because they got rid of net metering. And of course, this lobbying group has said, wow, that's great. And they want to do that nationwide. They want to make that happen nationwide. And so that's a regulation in front of FERC. They're taking comments on it for the next couple days. I think the comments close out on, Wednesday. But if you're somebody who's considering putting solar panels on your house, essentially what getting rid of net metering does is it means your utility company gets to steal your electricity. They don't have to pay you for it. They just take it from you. And that really sucks. All right. So that's the eco news. And we're racing along. And so a little brighter note, I think it's time for our letter from the future.
All right.
Yes, every week we get a letter from my great-great-granddaughter, Marie I., who's living in the year 2300. There's a flash of photons next to my bed, and here's this week's letter. Dear GGG, some good news from the future. Michael has finally come out of his coma. I was sitting by his bedside via hologram when he woke up. He immediately tried to reach out for me, except, of course, I wasn't physically there. It was just an image. Still, I talked to him and sang to him, and he fell back asleep after about 5 minutes. The doctors say he'll be able to stay awake longer and longer as time goes on. I wish I could have been there, but I know I needed to come back home for my own recovery. That recovery's been going pretty well. I'm able to walk all the way to the slippery elm trail now and almost to the end of the block. I realized that the sidewalks are another difference between my time and yours. You folks used to walk on paths that were cement or asphalt. We use wood chips that are packed down. It produces less erosion, it's easy to repair, and water soaks into it instead of running off of it. The fireflies are still here, though, in the year 2300. In fact, I see thousands of fireflies every night. Back in your time, pesticides and light pollution had almost driven them extinct. Still, as I watch the fireflies flashing in the evening, I think about how these fireflies I watch are actually descended from the few that managed to survive from your time, just as I'm descended from you. Thank you, GGG. I know you did what you could to keep fireflies alive in your time. It worked. Love, Marie I. There we go.
So I wonder how do those packed down wood chip paths work for people in, say, motorized wheelchairs, for example? Can they get them straight enough so that I don't know. Sidewalks are not perfect either. Sidewalks can get funky and cause problems with your motorized wheelchair.
Yeah, I imagine they've like designed the wheels of the wheelchairs and the surface of the sidewalks, quote unquote sidewalks, so that they're compatible. They're pretty clever about that sort of thing in the future. And if you pass
I've known people.
Yeah.
I've known people who have to take their chair in the street because the sidewalk is so messed up, then they have some kind of like spinal problem, which is part of their disability, that if they stick to the actual sidewalk, they'll be a lot more disabled in a hurry.
Yeah, which is not a good thing. And like I say, you could keep something like wood chips. You can keep them. You can fill in the holes really easy. You don't get those big cracks in the parts that lift up, and when a root grows under it. So, that's the nice letter.
Cool.
All right, Rebecca, you, I believe, had done a little research on something and about the Flint River. Could you?
That's the Flat River.
Now? Oh, the
Flat, F-L-A-T. It's not a very well-known river. It's located in central and western Michigan, mostly in Montcalm County. And I'm doing this as part of my Father's Day month series of stuff my dad likes, because it basically originates in Six Lakes, Michigan, in First Lake, which I did not know this. The town where my father was born is not a town. It's actually Belvedere Township, and it's just sort of called the Six Lakes area. Because guess why, Joe? There's 6 lakes.
That was going to be my guess, but go ahead.
Yeah. It's a tributary to the Grand River, and it has its own song because it's called the Flat River Song, and it's about a lumberman whose fiance runs off with his entire fortune because. But one of the things about the Flat River is that and First Lake used to be used for lumbering. They just kind of cut down the trees, put them in First Lake, and then float them on the Grand River all the way to the lake where that comes out. Yeah, so it basically runs through western Michigan, and apparently it's full of red-tailed carp, smallmouth bass, rock bass, pike, catfish. It's what they call a good beginner's river, because if you would like to try something like, canoeing or tubing or kayaking, but you're not very good at it and you're afraid you might get in some trouble out in a feistier river, the Flat River is for you. It's slow, it's fairly shallow, although it's got some deep places. It's kind of like a big swimming pool. It has a couple of covered bridges, apparently. There's a campground at First Lake. There's some trails around it, and also there's the White Bridge near Keens Township, near Smyrna, and the Fallisburg Covered Bridge in Vergennes Township. And it goes to the towns of Greenville, Belding, and Lowell. And I personally have camped at First Lake. It is definitely a campground. It's a place, and you can put tents there, and there are trees. Really, like that whole area where Dad comes from, where where the Wood family comes from. It's really, there's hunting, there's fishing. It's really very nice and quiet and natural in a lot of ways. It's a great place, if you just want to find a place to not be around very many humans and listen to birds and insects and stuff.
And I think that's the good thing for everybody to do from time to time. I think it really helps with your mental health if you're able to do that.
It's great because, like, there's really nothing, there's a few dairy cows out there. There's really, that's the thing about, it is the kind of place where, it was not a social handicap in the 1950s that my father's family did not have indoor plumbing because nobody did. That was for the rich people because there's kind of nothing up there economically speaking. The economic boom was the lumber mill in the the lumber industry in the late 1800s, and ever since then it's been fairly quiet. So if you want to go buy some stuff at the local corner store and just do some camping or something, they will be happy to see you.
Yeah, there's a lot of places around like that. I know when I was running for U.S. Senate on the Green Party line, I would make it a point to always stop at those little towns would have the one store, and that's where I would get my gas or get my lunch or whatever, and people.
It's also got a grain elevator, Joe. You got to mention the grain elevator in Six Lakes. That's a major. That in the corner store are the major. I think lately there's actually a hotel that started in like the 90s because somebody founded a weekly flea market in Six Lakes. So now there's a hotel, which there really was not as of the 80s. I remember we had, that's why we had to camp or stay with relatives.
Cool. All right. Well, I hear in the background, our theme music is starting up.
Indeed.
So we're coming to the end of the show here. Just wanted to say thank you all so much for listening, and we're just grateful that we're able to get some of this information out because you're not going to read about it. Unfortunately, you're not going to hear about it in many other places. And so please don't hesitate to act on the stuff that we're telling you because it is important for the future. And we all want a green future, don't we, Rebecca?
We certainly do.
All right. So thanks again for listening. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
And we are signing off.
Bye-bye.
Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nuclear